I guess, first of all, how many of you own Bitcoin or have Bitcoin wallets today? Yes, I guess this is San Francisco and launch. So I'm going to talk about GoCoin here today, which is a payment platform for merchants to accept Bitcoin, why that matters, and why you should be using it if you're a merchant. I'm Brock Pierce. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, going back to Internet 1.0 in the digital media space. I've been in the digital currency space since the late 90s as well, making markets for digital currency and online games like World of Warcraft. Built a company called IGE back in 2001, went from 0 to 100 million in revenue, 20 million of EBITDA in a matter of years, built a supply chain of 400,000 people in China that were playing video games to mine virtual currency. So these are not new concepts to me. And in the Bitcoin space, I've started a number of companies. I'm co-founder and chairman of GoCoin. I'm probably the most active angel investor in the Bitcoin ecosystem today. Started a Bitcoin syndicate on AngelList a little under a month ago. It's the number 6 syndicate on all of AngelList at this point. I think we're up to about $690,000 per deal. Still haven't tested it yet. We'll try the first deal maybe next week. And I'll let Kevin, who heads up engineering, put us through a 2.5-minute demo of the product, and then I'll walk you through the business.
Sir. Hey guys, I'm Kevin Beauregard. I'm the head of engineering at GoCoin, and this is our product. What you're seeing right now is the GoCoin dashboard. We're logging in under a pseudonymous account. And what I'm going to do is walk you through the absolute easiest way that you can integrate with GoCoin, and that is through our hosted forms platform. What we've built here is a form creation application similar to what you have at, say, wufoo.com. But what you can do with this form is generate an invoice in Bitcoin. Obviously, we have a full RESTful API that your developers can integrate with behind the scenes, but if you have a run-of-the-mill HTML website, you want to take Bitcoin payments, you want to take donations, this is the way to do it. What I'm doing right now, I'm creating an invoice for a fictitious good, a signed copy of Satoshi's white paper. And this is going to give me any fields that I want in this form. It gives me item details. All of this is mapped directly to the GoCoin API and then mapped to your invoice, your checkout system, anything else that you want to integrate with. You also have the ability to add custom text, custom CSS, direct forms, terms and conditions agreements, and right now we're redirecting to the form. What you're seeing is a baseline. This is what it looks like using Bootstrap, and you have the ability to override this with CSS. Going back, I'm going to add the custom CSS to the form. I'm a little bit slower than my talk, and I'm adding a simulation of terms and conditions. So you're saying you're going to agree to this before you submit this form and create an invoice. Going back to the form, refreshing the screen, you can see that those changes have taken effect. And now I want to pay in Bitcoin for this fictitious good. Checking out as Satoshi Nakamoto, who clearly works for GoCoin. Obviously, I didn't check the terms and condition box. This is going to stop me from checking out. Creates an invoice, and you're redirected to GoCoin's gateway. Here you can in a web browser, you can click on the QR code to check out directly if your wallet's on the same computer, or you can copy the address, copy the payment amount, and pay in Bitcoin. What you're seeing right now is a computer in a different part of the country that I've connected to via VPN, and I'm making a Bitcoin payment back to this server. It's now checking for my payment on the network, confirms in less than 5 seconds, and that invoice is paid, and I'm redirected to Satoshi's white paper. Back to Brock.
Great. So I guess why accept Bitcoin as a form of payment? There's probably only about 2 or 3 million people around the world that own or hold Bitcoin today. Bitcoin is essentially where the internet was in 1991. Though human behavior has changed, we all live in a digital world at this point, so we're going to go from 1991 to 1994, I believe, by the end of this year. I think by the end of next year, we'll probably be where 1999 is. So the ecosystem is being built, and the payments area is, I think, one of the spaces where you're going to see a lot of the early development. Well, thank you, Microsoft. I think what might be a good place to start when explaining why payments matter, when you run an internet company doing e-commerce, by being on the internet, you essentially have a global storefront. The problem today is, with that global retail storefront, a majority of the customers that walk through that door do not have the ability to transact with you. Maybe about a third of the world does. And part of the problem that you have is, A, they may not have credit cards, they may not have banking systems, but also there's this concept of trust. If you run an e-commerce site, you get a bunch of customers coming in from Nigeria, you're probably systematically just denying them because you believe it's going to be a fraudulent transaction. The same is true of kind of the emerging markets, places like China. A lot of customers have problems making those purchases. So what Bitcoin does is it enables the entire population of the planet to have the ability to join the internet economy. And I think that in and of itself is a pretty powerful thing when it comes to expanding the total revenue that's being generated online. As a merchant, some of the other benefits, well, let's step back away from Bitcoin for a second and let's just talk about, we have a whiteboard. We want to build a perfect payment system from a merchant's perspective. What are the attributes of that payment system? What are the pain points that we have currently? Fees. Naturally, I think all like lower fees. Fraud and chargebacks. Those are problems for anyone that sells anything online today. We'd like more customers. We'd like to give customers that currently, as I was just describing, don't have an ability to transact or pay to do so, and those would be called the top 5 or so attributes. Bitcoin checks all those boxes. Now, on the other hand, you say, well, Bitcoin's highly volatile, the price is fluctuating, it's going up and down, I have a business to run, I've got salaries to pay, I don't necessarily want my business to be subject to that, especially if you're, call it a low gross margin business, like many or some e-commerce providers that are selling physical goods. Companies like GoCoin mitigate that risk so that you get all of the benefits that Bitcoin has, and in their case, they take all the responsibility of actually liquidating and providing you with USD. So if you said, I want to sell this product for $100, at the time that transaction is concluded, you're getting $100 US, and it's up to GoCoin to figure out how to liquidate or get access to those funds. That's what these companies do, and that's what they specialize in. Is Microsoft working now?
Microsoft is failing.
Okay. This is, I guess, well, anyway, I'll just keep chatting with you about, I guess, GoCoin. So one of the other things that GoCoin does is, in the currency market, you have more than Bitcoin today. You also have now a number of altcoins. There's actually about 275 of them that I've at least seen logos for. There's probably thousands more. And eventually some of these things get scale. Litecoin being the second largest of the digital currencies. GoCoin is the first payments company in the cryptocurrency space that allows you to transact with Litecoin, and I think that went live yesterday with our first merchants now processing Litecoin. Back to, I guess, sort of emerging markets and Bitcoin in general. As Americans, Bitcoin is not something that most of us need. We've got banking, credit card systems, credit, rule of law, faith in the sort of commercial system. For most of us, it's a sort of speculative investment. But if we go just a little ways from here, and you end up in a place like Oakland, where a significant percentage of the population belong to this sort of community of unbanked, I like to focus on sort of the social impact of Bitcoin. So you have a lot of people that are making minimum wage, that are denied access to sort of the financial services industry. And as a result of that, when they get their paycheck, they end up having to go to a check cashing store and likely give up 10% of their hard-earned money, and really being denied the opportunity to ever get kind of anywhere in life. I also like to look at places like Africa, where as a result of not having any fixed infrastructure, they were able to leapfrog and skip sort of the wired telecommunications and went straight into mobile. In a place like that, I think Bitcoin has got the potential to become the primary infrastructure in a number of countries. And when I say primary infrastructure, the main way that people store their value or save their money, banking, the primary way that they'll be paying for things. And that's because there's about 200 currencies around the world and only about 4 of them that you want. And in the emerging markets in particular, I think, Bitcoin has that potential. Oh, we're working. Now, I've probably covered a few of these items already, so we'll breeze through this. But yeah, so GoCoin is a company. We raised a friends and family round late last summer. I see a couple of our angel investors in the room. At least I see Sam right here. We got a great group of investors, guys like Owen Vanetta, Sam Engelbart, guys like David Newman, who was the Chief Programming Officer of CNN and co-founder and president of Current TV with Al Gore, which they just sold last year to, I think, Al Jazeera. A number of internet entrepreneurs, guys like Andrew Frame, some media people, guys like John Congdon that started Beachbody or P90X. So we got a great group of sort of friends and family. I guess the Stevens family that started Robbie Stevens up here. I think they took Cisco and Yahoo and a bunch of companies public back in the 1.0 sort of eras. And we went live in January. In our first month, we processed about $500,000 worth of transactions. We're onboarding customers at a pretty rapid rate, and we've got some great customers in particular. The area where a majority of transactions have occurred in Bitcoin historically has been the area of Bitcoin mining, because people that are actually mining for Bitcoin have a lot of Bitcoin and they want to reinvest their profits to buy more mining equipment. So you see a huge percentage of transactions in that space being done with Bitcoin. So KNC Miner is the largest company in the Bitcoin mining space and the one with the best reputation. And so KNC Miner is working with us for some of their transactions. And why accept multiple currencies? I mean, from an angel investor sort of perspective, I don't know if Bitcoin is the Friendster, the MySpace, or the Facebook. It certainly looks like the Facebook today. But I don't know what's going to happen. So naturally, I'm supporting Bitcoin. I'm largely invested into Bitcoin. I've invested in a handful of other alt currencies as a way of hedging, but I'm really behind Bitcoin. The Bitcoin companies that are building out the infrastructure on top of this platform are sort of immune to that risk in the sense that if we sign up 1 million merchants, we're enabling them to process payments using cryptocurrency. If Litecoin, for example, were to replace Bitcoin, the companies that are building out the ecosystem should be immune to sort of any currency sort of risk. I've talked about these: fraud, high fees, credit cards, international sales, checkout, shipping. Well, the shipping and billing, I think, is, you get better conversion rates. If any of you have run internet e-commerce sites, one of the problems you have is, people filling out, you're managing a conversion funnel. The more clicks, the more questions, the more likely that you're going to see fall off when those transactions are being conducted. In the case of Bitcoin, unless you have rules around needing to know things about your customer, you have the ability to accept payment without accepting any information from them. And the ability to transact that fluidly is going to create better conversion rates. So I think that's worth noting. As I said, we take all of the sort of volatility and security risks, and it's low fees. We charge 1% for managing all that. Security, this is certainly a hot topic, I guess, in the Bitcoin space. Again, Bitcoin, the protocol itself, is incredibly secure. The companies that are building on top of the platform naturally have risks. One of our competitors, BIPs, got ripped off for $1 million, and I think those merchants are still trying to get their funds. But fortunately, as the market's developed, you're seeing better systems that are mitigating those risks, where you don't need to be printing out your coin onto paper wallets. This is worth noting. Millennius added Bitcoin as a payment option, and they're seeing now 5% of all their orders conducted with Bitcoin, and those Bitcoin users are spending more. In the case of PayPal, $314. In the case of Bitcoin, $831, and that's because people that own Bitcoin today are typically, from a demographics perspective, they've got lots of disposable income, typically well-educated, and fairly smart. We've gone through demos, so I don't know what the format here is in terms of Q&A. I can continue rambling on, or I can answer any questions you have.
Is this live? Hands? Excuse me.
Just curious, you mentioned that you guys hedge the volatility risk through, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Through diversification, exposure to other digital currencies. When you have 40%, 20% swings in value, how do you do that? How are you planning to do that going forward?
Well, yeah, so we don't take, our merchants, our merchant partners are not subject to any of that volatility risk unless they choose to keep Bitcoin. You have the ability to say, I want 100% of my funds, in dollars, euros, sterling, whatever it might be. Or you can say, I might want half of that and half of it in Bitcoin. Or you may say, I want 100% of my transactions to be in Bitcoin because for whatever reason, we as a company are comfortable having Bitcoin on our balance sheet, or I'm a small business and I personally would like to own some Bitcoin, and I might as well just earn them through the process of selling my goods and services. So how do we manage that? That's it's a couple of things, but one is we have a bunch of different sort of buyers that we work with, large institutional buyers. We're integrated into all of the exchanges, and we make sure that we're mitigating those risks. Ultimately, having a balance sheet helps, so that you're able to sell. You're trying to predict what are going to be the sort of how much Bitcoin am I likely going to have to liquidate tomorrow. Having some visibility into that makes managing it easier. But yeah, 1% is, a pretty reasonable fee for having to manage that risk in a market that's this volatile today.
Does Bitcoin work with small payments, or is there a minimum transaction amount, or is it just for large payments?
Well, that's an interesting
Large
point.
value.
Yeah, Bitcoin from a microtransactions perspective, you think about the credit card, it was designed in the 1950s. It wasn't designed for the world that we live in today in terms of what the internet allows us to do or enables us to do. And that's because if you've ever set up a merchant account or even work with a PayPal, typically there's a 30-cent minimum transaction fee plus a percentage, and it's the reason you didn't see, a lot of small payments. Apple, I think, was probably the first company to really succeed at providing something that at least looks like microtransactions, where you have the ability to buy a song for $1. I'm assuming if you buy one song for $1, Apple doesn't really make any money, which is the reason why they batch your orders. If you've bought 6 songs over a couple of days, you'll see that you actually paid that in one transaction. Because even if they have to process $1, there's normally the fees that are being extracted by the payments infrastructure is there. In the case of Bitcoin, there is no fixed fee, meaning you could be selling content, by the second or by the minute, and you can have 1-cent transactions. You can have a fraction of a penny transaction, which is actually kind of cool when you think about Bitcoin, the currency, and then most people are generally not familiar with Bitcoin, sort of the protocol, the blockchain, the infrastructure. So you have this giant sort of decentralized node of computers, and the first application that's been built on top of it is the currency. And that currency was needed as the first application to create the incentive for the network to be built. But now you can actually start to build all sorts of things on top of it. It's kind of, I like to call it the real Internet 2.0, because you have this new system that's inherently trustworthy. It's kind of the Internet of trust, and now we can build applications on top of it all types. So one idea that I'll leave you with is this concept of mesh networks, rolling out broadband connections everywhere. So now anyone with a Wi-Fi router can say, I want to provide Internet service to anyone around me. And anytime I'm consuming bandwidth, I'm paying in Bitcoin fractions of a penny, and anytime I'm providing bandwidth, I'm earning it on fractions of a penny. So there's all sorts of interesting industries that can emerge now that, real microtransactions can exist, and where payments can be automated and, where you're dealing with fractions of a penny.
Hi, my name is Huang. I was born in Vietnam. So how do you see people from emerging market to buy Bitcoin, because they don't have credit card there, and most of the transactions happen in cash?
Yeah, so again, Bitcoin is very, very early in its development. As I said, we're like in 1991. So a lot of the friction is around, if you think of Bitcoin as a freeway or a highway, the on-ramps and the off-ramps where you go from US dollars or going from a fiat government-issued currency into Bitcoin. That's where a lot of the sort of friction exists today. There's services like local Bitcoin, which exist in pretty much every country on earth, where you actually just go meet up with someone at a coffee shop and say, here's $100, and that's how historically a lot of people bought their Bitcoin, or they earned them again through mining. If you're in the developing world, we work with a lot of people now in Argentina, and the developers there all want to be paid in Bitcoin. So you can sell your time and your services and say, instead of paying me, in US dollars or whatever it might be. I want to be paid in Bitcoin. So you're seeing a lot of people doing that in the emerging markets, specifically sort of software developers. And then you have exchanges. You've got consumer exchanges, you've got retail, you've got called institutional exchanges. So another company that I work with is called ExpressCoin. We're an easy, fast, safe way to buy Bitcoin. You've got companies like Coinbase who've raised a lot of money here that have kind of a consumer-facing retail exchange. If you're a trader that wants to be able to, you know, buy large amounts and trade large amounts, historically, you know, Bitstamp has been the best platform for that. Mt. Gox has been in the press quite a bit for having failed at that. But you're seeing more and more on-ramps, and you're going to see a presentation here shortly from another sort of, call it friend of Brock, which is the RoboCoin guys. They've created the world's first Bitcoin ATM, and when I say, you've read about a few of these, what they call Bitcoin ATMs, they're really just vending machines where you have the ability to walk up with cash and buy Bitcoin. RoboCoin is, you know, an ATM in the kind of original sense of the word, where you have the ability to withdraw cash, so it works both ways. And I think you're going to be seeing, you know, RoboCoin ATMs rolling out all over Asia here relatively soon. And what that would mean is you walk into a store or a street where that machine exists, you'll deposit cash directly into an ATM type device and get Bitcoin, or you have the ability to deposit your Bitcoin and withdraw it in cash. The money remittance industry is an interesting one to focus on from that perspective. Money remittance, Western Union, MoneyGram, $500 billion a year industry, typically 9% fee. The poorer the people, the higher the fee typically charged. And so you have a lot of people from, you know, countries like Indonesia, India, the Philippines, and Mexico. Those would be the 4 largest migrant workforces in the world that go work in Dubai or London. They're earning money, and then they're sending those funds back home. And unfortunately, again, like the Oakland example, paying a lot for it. With a RoboCoin type kiosk, we could walk up to a machine in Vancouver today with the money we've earned, deposit it, and in Vietnam, for example, my family member on the other side of the planet could be withdrawing that in fiat in instance. And if you think about Bitcoin in the sense that there's maybe 2 or 3 million people using it today, by next year it's probably 20 or 30 million, and we might even by 2015, 16 see 1 billion people using it. And it's not necessarily where you're using it and knowing you're using it. Most people, and in this room at least, understand what HTTP is, but you don't need to understand it in the way that I just described this for the money remittance industry. I'm taking dollars and they're instantly being sent around the world and being withdrawn in another currency. You don't even really need to understand that Bitcoin, the payment rail and the infrastructure that you're using is Bitcoin. You're just leveraging it to facilitating sending money back home. So in the same way that you think about a lot of underlying technologies that you don't realize exist and you're not touching, you know, Bitcoin, I think, is going to end up touching 1 billion people here in the next couple of years, with most of them not even knowing it.
Thanks so much, Brock. Great presentation.